A little bit different than you might have expected if you're tuning in expecting to hear from we are front center staff. Nyema Clark from Nurturing Roots couldn't join us today. She's dealing with a car issue, so we are here as front and center staff to just check in with you all on the last day of Earth Deserves More Than a Day. It's been a week, a very packed week of lots of interesting programming. I certainly learned a lot, even as someone who is not new to this work. And we hope you did as well. And we hope you learned about a lot of what communities across Washington state and beyond are doing to advance environmental and climate justice. So yeah, welcome. Sorry we can't bring you Nyema today, but if you are interested in hearing Nyema Clark talk about the work of Nurturing Roots, you can go back to our website, frontandcenter.org. Go to our Monday schedule. Anything you've missed from this week is up on YouTube and Facebook as videos. So go to our Monday schedule for April 17th. You'll find our conversation with Nyema, Olivia, and other folks from Nurturing Roots, as well as videos from Nurturing Roots from that day. But yeah, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, who's our membership lead.
Yeah, thanks, James. And for all of you who did tune in to listen to Nyema, we will be rescheduling that conversation. So thank you very much for letting everybody know. Today is going to be a little different. As James had said earlier, we have some people here and we are all going to talk about just why these events are important, what we do at Front and Center, what we do here. I'm the membership lead, so I get to go out and show up for our members. I get to talk to them. I get to see how what their capacity looks like. I get to really, I get the most fun job of Front and Center, I think. I'm very blessed to have that, is because I get to go into the different communities along with my colleagues here at this table, and especially just kind of be in community with most of our members. And so I'm very blessed because I think that we do so much and I get to learn every single day. I'm going to pass it over to Jill Mangaliman, who is a Front and Center member, board member, and has been here since day one. So I'm going to pass it over to Jill and let them take it away.
Yeah. Hello. Jill Mangaliman. Yeah, thank you. They, them pronouns. I'm a board member of Front and Centered. Actually, it's true. I was here at the time. I was at the ED at Got Green and one of the founding members. And at the time in 2014 is when we released, we got together and made basically a manifesto for climate justice with communities of color in the state of Washington. And back then, we weren't calling ourselves Front and Centered, but we were the starting point of Front and Centered. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. And beautiful to see the organization grow. Currently, I'm part of Bayan Seattle, which is a founding member. It's an alliance of progressive Filipino organizations, including youth and students, women, migrants. And we take up issues of workers and migrants and fight for, the community to, have their rights and welfare, our needs met. And then I'm also involved greatly with, Front and Centered, obviously, as a board member. Been enjoying my time here all week long. So, happy to talk more about what's been going on here.
Actually, Jill, I want to ask you, can you tell the audience a little more about Gabriela? Because we recently put out a blog post about Gabriela's work, and I was really impressed by what I heard. So, could you tell the public a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So Gabriela Seattle is a member of Bayan. So as a Filipina women's organization, it's actually one of my first political homes. We are a collective of Filipina women who fight for, women here, but also for our people back home in the Philippines. And so we try to close that distance because a lot of our people have been, forced to migrate due to economic reasons or political reasons. And so for Gabriela, which is named after Gabriela Solong, a revolutionary in our history, is to really teach us how to fight for our rights. And for people who know about the history of the Philippines, it's hard to talk about, but the Philippines is actually, on paper it's an independent country, but actually in reality it's been controlled by foreign countries such as the United States, such as China, because of its rich resources. And so we always say, like, the people of the Philippines are poor, and yet the land is so rich. Why is that? It's because our people are not truly free. And so one of our goals as Gabrielle is to fight for national liberation, to fight for us to be able to have our, a say in our government, to actually have land for the farmers and jobs for our people so they don't have to leave home. And so part of my work here in Seattle is to help connect those issues and connect with Filipino migrants so that we can realize that we are agents of change, and we can actually fight for a better future together with other struggles. So that's actually where I kind of grew up as an activist too. I didn't really think about these issues until I came across Gabriella, and then later on got green. So I think that if you haven't already organized before or joined a group, I really encourage people to join. And that way you can see what collective action looks like.
That's a good point. I mean, I think that there's so many different ways to get involved. And Jill has been here from the very beginning, and Nico is new. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about who you are and why this is important, why you are here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Nico Wedekind. I'm the new attorney for Front and Centered. At this point, it's been like a month and a half, I think, since I started. I was lucky enough in my prior position with the University of Washington to get to work with Front and Centered a lot, specifically with regard to the Clean Energy Transformation Act. So energy justice work that Front and Centered is doing in the regulatory sphere, working with utilities to try and get a shift towards clean energy to be as equitable as possible. I think this work, I came to this work because I had a background in environmental law. And I think the traditional models of environmental law were very focused on natural resources and resource preservation, which I think is still very important, but I think there was an oversight from the legal community in the aspect of, well, we've got a built environment as well, and that counts as environmental law, and we need to consider that as part of the environment and see how our community members are living and what our decisions in our day-to-day lives have. And I think as I went through law school, I started seeing these gaps more and more in the legal education, and that was something I started getting more and more interested in. And so when I was presented at the end of law school with the opportunity to do a fellowship and work with Front and Centered, I jumped at the chance, the first opportunity I had. And luckily, as timing had it, as soon as that fellowship ended, there was a position open with Front and Centered. So great coincidence, great happy timing, and I'm really excited to be joining.
Yeah. I feel like you've been with us for a very long time. So I think everybody feels that way. So I did want to ask James. James has been here this whole entire week working on everything from the emails to the posters to everything. And why is this so important to you, James? I mean, and from a comms, tell people who you are.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so I am the communications lead for Front and Center. My name is James Lee. For me, this is really important because communications work, usually if people hear that term, you think of press releases, you think of talking to reporters, you think of like, maybe you think about, what's our brand or our message, and all of that's important. But another important part of communications for me in particular is about building capacity with our member organizations. And that's something I'd really like to dig into this year, because for me, as someone who comes from the Bay Area, from a movement background, I really found my voice through communications, like learning just on the ground as an activist, like, how do I write a press release? How do I get media to come to my little protest that I'm organizing with my friends? Like, how do I do all that? And so doing all that work on the ground really showed me how powerful that work is and how empowered you can feel as an individual and more connected to your community you can feel when you do that work. So part of what I see as communications work is making sure that our members get that experience too, if they haven't already, because a lot of our members already are great communicators. That's why they're in the positions that they're in. But anything we can do as front and center to support that work, to give them the training, the experience, or even just the listening ear and advice that they need, so that they can, become more empowered to become better self-advocates, public communicators. I think that's really important. I want to mention, actually, talking about self-advocacy. One of my good friends, Mel Baggs, was an autistic advocate, and in particular, she was an advocate for autistic self-advocacy, and Mel passed away during the start of the COVID pandemic in April. So it's been 3 years since they left us. But if you look up Mel Baggs, you'll see a lot about what activism means for people who are disabled, are neurodivergent, or LGBTQ+, and what it means to advocate for yourself rather than have people speak for you. So for me, that's what communications is about, not just the press releases and the messaging, but about that side of the work as well. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Yeah, no problem. And I heard this such an important piece is that, like, power in community, right? The power of community and seeing that. We did the highlight on Gabriella, from Nico's history and from your history, and what you try to convey is the power of not only our members, but people that aren't members of Front and Center, the partners, and just the communities that they serve. And so I want each of you to talk a little bit about, like, what you see and what you think about when it comes to community. And each of you have a different reflection, a different experience. But, like, when you think of community and you think of the power of community, what comes to mind? And I'll start with Jill.
When I think about community, I think about how, much further we can go, or how much can be accomplished by working together. As individuals, it can feel really daunting to want to make a change in the world. And sometimes it's also isolating, right? Like, I think a lot of us experienced that during the pandemic, being cooped up in our homes and not being able to see our loved ones or being able to connect with people. And I think, there's so much crisis in the world today, like the climate crisis, there's the crisis of the economy, and it can feel really hopeless sometimes. But when we are, together, when we're connecting with each other's struggles, and it feels less alone. And I feel like we can really achieve a lot when we put aside our differences. And because ultimately we want, I think most people want the similar things, right? Like our basic needs met, healthy air, healthy world, livelihood. And so I think, like, we can do a lot by working together. And so community facilitates that connection, that collective feeling, so that, we can't just rely on individual heroes to save the day. It's really going to be on us to, fight for the things that we want. And it's through community that we find our strength and come together to make those things possible.
Nico?
Yeah. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great response.
Yes.
I think one of the first things that came to mind when you asked this question was the legal community. And as I touched on a little bit earlier, the legal community can range on any number of topics and any number of issues. And oftentimes lawyers like to self-identify as, I do this kind of practice, I do that kind of practice. But then there's this discussion constantly of, like, well, what is the legal community? And it's not always just lawyers. There's an entire ecosystem of individuals that are working towards the legal system, that are upholding and maintaining that system. And I think there is a very fair critique of the legal system, that it is a way to sort of keep power localized for a certain group or groups, and sort of take power away from communities. And I think something for me that community means is finding the people in the legal community that want to change what that looks like, what that power structure, what those dynamics look like, and actively want to start moving away from the current power structures and challenging that. And I found that at Front and Centered through the member organizations, through the team members at Front and Centered, through the work that I get to do. It's been inspiring in that sense. And then even just connecting with more and more lawyers as my role progresses here. I think one of the goals that we've set in bringing a lawyer onto the Front and Center team is to try and expand what we're calling a just transitioning legal network. That work is already being done in multiple states, so connecting on the nationwide level, but even just within Washington State, connecting with different lawyers who are committed to this transition away from these historical power structures.
Yeah, for me, I guess I would say that community means a couple things. I think about my family, but also as a person who is gay, like I also think of, like, for a lot of those of us who are gay, you think of your found family, because often your biological family you either lose or intentionally step away from. So I think about my found family as community as well. I also think about my family, like, overseas. That's part of the reason I asked you about Gabriella, Jill, because Korea is kind of the same way in the sense that, yes, we are technically an independent, South Korea is technically a sovereign independent country, but its economic drivers are heavily influenced by what the US wants and what's happening in its neighbors, China and Japan. And a lot of progressive champions we have in the US have passed laws that actually have made, my family in Korea unsafe. So, there's that dynamic as well. So I think a lot about community, not just like locally, but also globally, and like what our actions do to, there are actions we can take here that help, folks very nearby, but might not do good for the planet as a whole and for people across borders. And and Rebecca, you should answer your own question too.
Oh. I was going to rebut all of it. Well, not rebut, but like I was going to take points from each of you. But I definitely, I agree. Like community can look different. I agree about the shift of power. I think that Nico, that is a very big thing that we all need to take into account, is that the power needs to shift back to community. And I appreciate the fact that Jill said that actually sometimes community can be isolating. You can be siloed within your immediate community and at times feel that disconnected in a way. And I think that sometimes those things are not talked about and brought up. Community to me is not only it's like a shared consciousness. It's community to me means that we are standing together. It means that there are some people. There is a sense of shared vision or shared mission. It may not be the same path to get to that, but if you stand in community, if these people at this table are part of my community, and I know there is that shared respect and that shared mission, right, to serve, and I appreciate that. And that's very big, because I know that even though, yes, at times it can be like you are sometimes fighting with only the people in your community, I think that there's that safety. And I feel like there's also safety and power. And I think that those are the terms that speak to me when I think of community. Sure.
Thinking about environmental justice, the environmental justice community has been around a long time. And I think about in the early days when, they started out as like local neighborhood fights, and basically not in my backyard, don't build this polluted like industry, get rid of this paint company, or don't, build a land fill next to our school. And then it became something bigger because it wasn't that people didn't want it just in their neighborhood, but they also didn't want any neighborhood to suffer. And so I often talk to folks about the people of color environmental justice principles that were drafted up in DC, where all of the communities came together in the early 90s to really say, like, we're taking a stand together, and it's like we're in solidarity with, the people in the Appalachians, the people in Mexico, the people in the Northwest, because we don't want to see any community suffer or be a sacrifice zone. And so I think that that way, they can't split us up. They can't divvy up our communities like, okay, we're going to give you some funding, and then we're going to throw you all under the bus, which happens all the time. And so when community is strong, we're able to fight back and protect each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that the standing together, that's something that sticks with me, and I think that we do talk a lot about this fight because it's fact, right? Communities of color, there are environmental injustices, there's facts, right? But we also we talk about the joy, right? That I think power isn't, and when we talk about that, it's not only trauma, but it's also joys. And it's also like this sense of, like I mentioned earlier, learning, right? Learning from people who are in with that shared mission, that shared vision. Can you share some of the joys that you see in neighborhoods and the communities that you work with?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to my undergrad days in Boston. So my mom was born and raised in the Philippines and moved to the U.S. for college, and then remained out here post-college working, but has always maintained a strong connection with the rest of our family, which is still back in the Philippines. And she raised me with a pretty common understanding of this is you're part Filipino, like my family's there, my cousins are there. Some of my cousins are now back in the U.S. or moved to the U.S., but still have a lot of cousins out there. My aunts and uncles are out there, and I knew what it meant to be part of the Filipino community in the Bay Area in California, but I didn't ever really understand what that meant until I went to Boston for college, and Boston College, my undergrad, had a very strong Filipino community, a student cultural club, and I was able to join that. Everyone welcomed me with open arms there, and then really got to join in and sort of build this culture out at this school that had always had a pretty strong Filipino society, but in the time that I was there, it was like one of the main groups that I was involved with. And it always brought me this immense amount of joy, whether we were doing a dance competition and showing the school traditional dances like Maglalatik, and then bringing food, bringing whatnot. It was a great opportunity to share culture and express joy while also bringing students who had otherwise not known about the culture club some experience and some introduction to that, and starting to, especially at the time that the school was starting to question what a homogenous student body otherwise looked like, and starting to challenge, is this what we want to be as a school? Is this what we want to do? What are our principles as a school? And so bringing joy and also questioning and challenging, I think go hand in hand. I'm expressing that.
No. Thanks for that, Nico. I was just told that we have 1 minute before break, so sorry to cut you off, Nico. But I think we'll come back from break, but if those of you listening could reflect on that, that'd be great. And just while we have a little bit of time, I want to remind you that you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio in partnership with Front and Centered and the Social Justice Film Festival. Again, if you were hoping to hear about food justice and urban environments with Nyema Clark, we're very sorry that Nyema couldn't join us today, but feel free to hang on. We're going to talk a little bit more about what our joys are. And then also I might get Rebecca to talk about why she had this crazy idea for kitchen table conversations and why we decided to do this and start this during Earth Deserves More Than a Day. So yeah, Please stay tuned, and we'll be back from break in a second.
Rainier Avenue Radio.
Are you nerdy by nature? The Crosscut Ideas Festival is back with captivating conversations to quench your curiosity. Explore issues in science, health, culture, and politics with thought leaders and innovators like Ibram X. Kendi, Audie Cornish, Eric Holder, John Quillen Hill, Andrew Yang, and more. April 29th to May 6th at the Amazon Meeting Center in downtown Seattle. It's the Crosscut Ideas Festival, where curiosity and discovery connect. Get your tickets at crosscut.com/festival.
Women are not an homogenous group.
We face discrimination differently depending on factors such as ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, and more.
Rainier Avenue Radio is proud to amplify women's voices.
They are the experts of their own lives, initiating conversations within their community about challenges they face, the solutions they're working on, and the opportunities they see.
Please join us this Sunday from 2 to 5 for Women's Voices on Air. We know our challenges. We are the experts of our lives.
We are master multitaskers, prioritizing our family, friends, and our faith above our own needs.
Our needs and voices are too often overlooked.
Please join us this Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. for Women's Voices on Air.
We tell our stories in our own way.
This is Brenda Charles Edwards, host of Seniors Matter. Join me every week to get information on activities and issues that impact the lives of older adults and their families. That's Seniors Matter every week on Rainier Avenue Radio.
You probably have questions about COVID vaccines. Here are some answers about how they're being made.
How are COVID vaccines being produced faster?
Usually, vaccine testing and production are separate steps. But because of the pandemic, vaccines are being developed on parallel tracks. So both steps are happening just at the same time.
How are the vaccines being tested?
Right now, several different COVID vaccines are in testing. Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio. .world.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Again, this is James Lee with Front and Centered. You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio in partnership with Front and Centered and the Social Justice Film Festival for this week of programming called Earth Deserves More Than a Day. When you were listening to us in the first half, we ended with a quick discussion about what our joys are. So I'm going to take that question, and then the rest of the folks up here at the table are going to take that question, and then we're going to I want Rebecca to talk about why we're doing these kitchen table conversations too. So this is going to be kind of, it's going to be super like frivolous and silly, but right now my joy is like looking up a lot of funny memes online on social media. My ex and I were still good friends, and we send a lot of cat memes to each other. And that's been my life for the past, since I adopted a couple kittens a few months ago. So that's kind of been my life, and that's where most of my humor is these days. So I'm going to say that, not a very, I don't know if that's a very deep answer, but
it doesn't need to be deep.
Yeah.
Joy is joy, right?
Memes, yeah.
It's your joy. I mean, yeah. I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
I
got to have you earlier, so I'm going to talk about cat memes now.
Lightening up, balance. Balance is important. My joys, well, I if you're gonna bring up the cats, I gotta bring up the dogs, right? I love my dogs. I think that lately I've been finding joy. I've been getting out more into visiting our members and just seeing the different organizations and the different events that they're putting on, and going to more of our member events and supporting. I've been finding a lot of joy in that. Not only am I'm eating a lot of great food. I'm meeting a lot of great people. I am I'm like seeing different ways to participate, to volunteer. So yeah, I think I've been finding a lot of joy in just getting out there in the neighborhood and actually going to our member organizations and really kind of seeing what they have going on. I've been finding a lot of joy in that lately. Jill?
Yeah, I mean, shoot. It's I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be a rough couple of years, There's been a lot of people pass away in my life, parents, family, and even people in our movement who have passed away. Like I just heard two revolutionaries from the Philippines, Wilma and Benito Tiazamon, who have been like in the movement forever, like since it started, were killed really brutally. And so it's just been heavy. And so finding joy has been really hard. But I think what I have been able to do is connect with the kids and the youth, especially in Gabriela. There's a lot of like kiddos who, because we have a lot of moms, and they, and I end up like, hanging out with the little people, and they bring me a lot of joy. That like it just reminds me of like what we're fighting for, and they're so sharp too. They're so smart, and I'm like, oh man, like I wasn't that smart when I was a kid, and here they are, like just full of life. And so I think like back to the balance thing. It's like yes, there's this system full of death, but it's also full of life, and it's these reminders that that's what we're here. Like we're fighting for the future generations, and so I've been having fun, finding joy, playing with kids.
Yeah, you were here for the youth night this week. We, in part of our Earth Deserves More Than a Day event series, we had a night where we had some youth from Feast, Anak Bayan, and Kitsap Black Student Union join us for a night of conversation. It was a youth radio takeover. And I'd love to hear, Nico, you weren't here for that, so you might have to sit that one out. But you can also talk about what the importance of youth right now in movements. But I would like to definitely first get feedback from Jill and James, because they were here, and then also add Nico in regards to like what are you seeing? There's so many great things coming out of youth movements right now. So I'll kick it over to James and get some feedback on what the night.
I mean, if you weren't able to be here Wednesday night for the Youth Radio Takeover, definitely, again, go to our website, frontcenter.org. Anything that you missed this week will be there. Go to Wednesday and go to our Youth Radio Takeover links. I mean, these kids were amazing. They made me feel super old. They made me feel super impressed. Kids who are like 16, 17, expressing, really thoughtful things in a way that, I don't know, at 17, I was probably picking my nose or something, and, just not at that level of understanding of, what environmental justice or social justice or climate justice or, the crisis that we're in now, definitely didn't have that understanding. And that's also, again, partly because I am older and the crisis wasn't as imminent then when I was a kid. But it did make me reflect on that too, because when I was a kid, I heard about global warming as a kid. I am a full-grown adult now, and we still have not done anything about it. And that's essentially why we're here, to highlight the fact that there are so many people who are not in power doing their darndest to do something about it, because the folks who have the power aren't doing enough. And so when you're faced with that sort of looming crisis, it can be really hard to be inspired sometimes and motivated sometimes. But yeah, seeing the young people who are just like, yeah, let's do this. Like, we know we've got barely any time. Like, we need to fix this, like, even before I turn 18, but like, let's do this, you know? So it's been really great it was great to have that energy around.
Yeah, and hearing them like wanting to, like start with what's around them in their community, especially like improving their school, the conditions in their school, whether it's like healthy food or like ethnic studies, so they can learn about their history and culture, or even like making sure that there's mental health services for each other and their peers. And just like I was like thinking back, like, wow, that would have been great, when I was growing up to have. And also, I don't think there was the same kind of like community groups or clubs when I was growing up. So I'm like, wow, slightly envy. I'm like, wow, you all coming together and coming up with like these plans, and being able to support each other too. And it's not to say like it's any easier. In fact, I want to say I agree. Like, the crisis only gotten worse, so it's must be even harder to organize. But it sounds like, I have faith that this generation is really gonna help us move forward and fight some of these terrible things that that's been lingering in our communities for so long. So. And just a lot of good energy too. I left that night feeling hopeful. Yeah.
So some of the youth that were here, if you want to learn more or support those youth that are doing those things, like changing their schools, fighting for the Philippines, and also working on transportation justice. Kids at Black Student Union, Feast of Seattle, Anak Bayan of Seattle, please look them up and see what they're doing. I mean, they are definitely doing a lot of things. And so, I welcome you to just learn more about a lot of the amazing things that came out of that evening, and also where they're going next. This is going to be an exciting thing to see where they're going next. I'm going to hand it over to Nico to talk about like these youth movements that you're seeing, and like, why is that important to incorporate youth into some of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'm going to say I've got a long travel down to California on Sunday, so I'm planning on listening to the recording of that the youth radio takeover. It sounds super interesting. I've been hearing only good things from those who attended, so very excited. I think the first thing with the amount of movements from young people is just sheerly that number of movements. It's pretty impressive to see how, as everyone at this table has already mentioned, young people are gathering, forming community, really challenging the ideas of what they're both being taught, but also just recognizing and harnessing their own power through community. So it's really exciting to see that happening. I mean, we have kids suing the federal government. We have kids suing state governments for climate change, like saying these are real effects. These have real world effects. And you've changed the world that we're going to be living in, the world that we have to grow up in, the way that we have to grow up. And this is not acceptable. And really, I don't think at that age I would have had the ability to, as James said, I think I was raging against nothing in particular. I think I was just upset with how the world functioned. And I said, well, that's not okay. And I was just always mad at like whatever I viewed as authority, but I didn't really have a way of channeling that to see that next step being taken by young people, just really focusing and organizing. It's really inspiring for me. And it's a nice refresher of, oh, that's why I do this work. Right. I need to keep doing that. One, my job's going to get taken otherwise because these kids are way smarter than I am. But two, there's a reason. There's people coming after me. It's not just my current age group. It's not the age groups that came before me. It's for the future. And I think that's why we do a lot of the work that we do.
Yeah, I mean, in additional to what youth that were on Wednesday, and seeing some of the things like you said, being inspired and seeing like, oh, this is why. We do have Duwamish River Community Coalition that also has an amazing youth program. Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, a wonderful youth program. We have farm worker youth that are getting involved right now. So there's so many different members right now that have that are taking the young people that are in their communities and really doing some amazing things. So I just encourage you all to just learn a little bit more about what's happening, because there's a lot of things happening from young people that are leading it, not just, showing up to a meeting and, listening. They're actually taking the lead. And I just, to switch it to leadership, right? And watching these young people take the lead. So leading, Front and Center has led the way through our members, right? Through our coalition members on a lot of things. And Jill, can you talk about some of the things that Front and Center is stepping out and taking the lead on?
Yeah, for sure. So folks may have heard of the HEAL Act. It's a bill that we were able to pass front and centered in our partners. And gosh, it was 2018. It doesn't feel that long ago, but still trying to actually implement in the state and really putting environmental justice in every single policy department as a priority for the state. Because we know our history of Washington State, even though we're the evergreen state, there are so many communities and neighborhoods, especially where people of color and migrants live, that are being sacrificed or being forced to live in a polluted, unhealthy environment. And so this is really putting our communities front and centered. And so our wonderful staff and coalition have been fighting tooth and nail to make sure it actually happens. Because what we know is even though you pass a bill, it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. And we actually have to see it through and see it, feel it on the ground through the implementation, hold it accountable. And then we've also been really cautious around carbon markets. And in 2020, there was the Climate Commitment Act passed, which created a carbon market in Washington State. And so continuing to hold accountable, making sure that it's not going to negatively affect our communities, and being very, very vigilant on that. And then aside from that too, Front and Center was really present during the pandemic to ensure energy justice for low-income families, making sure that people didn't have their electricity shut off, or that people didn't experience, the cold winter. And yeah, something I really appreciate about Front and Center is really, paying attention to the different issues of the members and going to support them as they're fighting, for example, with the farm workers, supporting them as they're fighting for heat rule regulations or for overtime pay. And so just making sure that, environmental justice is throughout the state and that the community partners are being supported.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
I wanted to remind you about that question I had for you, Rebecca.
Oh.
I mean, I'm having a really good time in this conversation, and I feel like we mentioned it over the break while you, the audience, weren't here. But just I feel like I've known these folks for a little while now, at least, and I feel like I learned a lot about everybody. So I just wanted to hear from you, Rebecca, just more about why you want to have these kitchen table conversations with our members in particular, and where that all came from.
Yeah, so kitchen table conversations, to me, a lot of things happen at the kitchen table. You get fed at the kitchen table, you cry at the kitchen table, and it may not be a kitchen table actually in a kitchen. It could be a farm table. It could be a table where you all sit and take a rest together. The kitchen table has been a place where, at least in my family, is where your soul gets filled, your belly gets filled, your heart sometimes. We have our family portal on there, so we get to talk to family members, and so it's a way it's a place of communication. It's a place where you get full. And so I thought that it was just be a really good thing to talk about, not only, of course, front and center environmental justice and environmental issues, but talk about other things as well, and a place where we can all come together and get full, and in a way that we can walk away supported and that we can feel that. And so that's how kitchen table conversations, I think earlier this week I said something similar. I think it's along the same lines. Of course, every conversation's different, but yeah, so hopefully that people walk away feeling that they have that connection, and that they've been fed in some way at the kitchen table. Yeah, so that's how they came
for
out.
sharing that. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so you will hear much more kitchen table conversations throughout the year. As James mentioned, they will be with members, but sometimes I'm going to pull in, like today. Thank you. I appreciate you, the three of you, for standing in. Again, we will schedule that conversation with Nyema Clark. We are on Rainier Avenue Radio in the historic Columbia City Theater. We will be having a mixer tonight to, again, continue this conversation, but with a lot more people. But yeah, I think that this is a start of a really cool thing. And so I appreciate the three of you for standing in. And for those of you who have tuned in to get that conversation with Nyema, you can tune in to hear Nyema from earlier this week, and you can tune in later on this year for our rescheduled conversation.
Yeah, so again, if you want to hear from Nyema Clark about Nurturing Roots and what's been going on with the farm and where they're at currently, go to our website, frontandcenter.org. Go to the Monday portion of our schedule for this week. We played, 7 different short films that feature Nurturing Roots. So you'll definitely get your fill, and you'll definitely be able to hear from Nyema, Olivia, and I think Kellyanne, who is here. So feel free to check that out. I also do want to mention, because Rebecca, you mentioned that we have some, you talked about, how great you feel going to member events. So I want to point out that we do have member events happening tomorrow as well, which is actually Earth Day. So you can go to, again, if you go to our website, our schedule for Earth Deserves More Than a Day, you'll see that there's now a Saturday section there that lists our member events. We've got a Yakima Earth Day Fair sponsored by the Asia Pacific Islander Coalition, the Yakima chapter of that coalition specifically. We've got the Air Fair with the Duwamish River Community Coalition. We've got an eco fashion show with Utopia Washington and Kent. And we've also got Black Earth Day at Yes Farm. If you Google it, it's 727 Yesler Way. That's not a real street address, but that's the closest you'll get to it. But check it out. It's a great farm. And if you were checking out our content earlier this week, you'll have heard from the Black Farmers Collective, who operate out of there, as well as out of a farm in Woodinville. So we've got a lot of great events happening tomorrow for Earth Day that our members are organizing themselves. So after you come out to our event tonight here at the theater, Columbia City Theater, we urge you to go check out those events as well. And so when it comes to what's happening tonight, let me just share a little bit about that as well. We're going to have a film called The Doctrine of Recovery, which is a play on the discovery doctrine, which is, if you might have heard that the Vatican released a statement rescinding the doctrine of discovery. And it was a very harmful piece of language, I'll put it that way, that paved the way, pun intended, for settler colonialism here in the United States and elsewhere. So The Doctrine of Recovery is a great film that features Indigenous women, and they talk about what the doctrine of discovery meant for them on the personal level and community level as well. So please come down to the theater for our mixer tonight. Doors open at 5. We'll probably start the film a little bit before 6. And that event is not going to be streamed. The Doctrine of Recovery is only available here in person because it's still on the festival circuit. So we do not have the rights to stream it online. So if you want to come see it, you want to come hang out with us, come learn more about Front and Centered and what our members are doing, you have to be here tonight for that. And I just wanted to, is there anything else we need to say? I know we need to end a few minutes early because we want to set up for our next event.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there anything more you'd like to say to close us out, Rebecca?
No, I just think that this has been a pretty awesome week. And I think that we have learned a lot from all of the guests that we've had this week. But we continue to post things on our website. I also want to say thank you to Rainier Avenue Radio. I want to say thank you to Tony Benton and all of the folks that work here in the Columbia City Theater. So so this is our last conversation, our last radio show here. And I just want to say thank you for a long week of just, hanging out together and really being able to show people and learn together. So thank you again to Columbia City Theater, Rainier Avenue Radio, and I will see you all tonight. See you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.